good morning again to everybody. As I was saying today, I would like to present my doctoral project titled Beyond Aristotle and Ontoterminological Research for Zoological Knowledge in the Rerum Medicarum of Hispaniatesaurus. And I would say also that being at a very early stage, maybe this presentation could be largely theoretical. However, my goal today is to present to you my research idea, and of course gather feedbacks and suggestions to help shape further development. First, I would like to introduce myself, since nobody knows me here, and share some details about me. I graduated in theoretical and applied linguistics, and I currently work in research. In 2022, I won a research grant at the Institute of Computational Linguistics in Pisa, which is part of the National Research Council. And since then, I work in the Root project, where I focused on the Somali and Hebrew languages, specializing in historical Somali terminology and marriage terminology in Hebrew. I specialize over the years in historical ethnographic terminology, gaining also some semantic web technologies skills. Of course, combining everything with my previous theoretical linguistic knowledge. So let's now turn to my doctoral thesis. Well, what is the goal of my proposal? My project is focused on the work Rerum Medicarum Novi Hispaniatesaurus by Francisco Hernandez. Specifically, I will look at the zoological section of this work. My first scientific direction is to analyze this work through the lens of classical models, particularly the Aristotle's one. And my additional goal is to develop a computational lexicon as an ontoterminological resource by employing semantic web technologies. Here I list some of the research questions that have guided me in my choice of this work, and maybe will guide me during my doctoral journey. That is, how does Hernandez zoological classification and description compare to classical models, particularly Aristotelian framework? To what extent did Hernandez integrate, modify, or challenge classical zoological categories based on his observation in New Spain? And how can computational and ontological approaches improve our understanding of Hernandez zoological terminology and its relationship with both indigenous and classical traditions? Starting from exploration conducted by Hernandez at the request of King Philip II of Spain. His work documented for the first time the biodiversity of the New World, but especially for the first time documenting the indigenous, thus creating a true connection, a true bridge between Mesoamerican indigenous culture and European scientific science. And this work at the time had a significant impact, and its influence is clearly reflected in the enduring scholarly interest that has persisted during the century. This is further demonstrated by a specific project, an ongoing multidisciplinary project called Il Tesoro Messicano, which was initiated in 2011, and which, of course, dedicated to the Hernandez work. This project is very important because it unites esteemed institutions such as the Accademia dei Lincei, the National Autonomous University of Mexico, the Galileo Galilei Museum of Florence, the Institute for European Intellectual Lexicon and History of Ideas of the CNR of Rome. But however, while the botanical section of Hernandez's text has received considerable attention, its zoological contribution are so far underexplored. So my research originates directly from the identification of such a significant gap in the zoological aspect, which I intended to address by applying advanced methodologies and creating specific ontoterminological reserves. The reference text of my research will be the 1671 Lynchian edition, which is based on the work of Hernandez, but I have to clarify that this volume is precisely developed from the compendium created by another author. So this work has a very interesting editorial history and faced actually significant editorial challenges during over the centuries. But I won't go, of course, into details. I simply will say that it was met with indifference by King Philip II, who diminished its immediate practical value. This is very important. And Recchi was tasked with reorganizing these documents. But it is only after years with Prince Federico Cesi, the founder of the Accademia dei Lincei, that we could have a publishable version, which was complete in 1671. So the publication of Hernandez is it's a revised effort of the Accademia dei Lincei. This is a very old scientific society, academy, which is now dedicated to promoting and disseminating the highest level of scientific knowledge, and counting among his members in the past scholars such as Galileo Galilei. The resulted volume edition has a complex structure as it blends original material from Hernandez with contribution from the Accademia dei Lincei. We can say that it preserves Hernandez's findings, but also reflects the collaborative spirit of scientific inquiry during the 17th century. I will specifically focus on the 9th volume, which is dedicated to the zoological data gathered by Francisco Hernandez. But additionally, an examination will be conducted on Johannes Faber's treatise on animals, which is another part of the volume. We are talking about approximately 400 pages, in which Faber, which was the chancellor of the Academy and also a papal physician, present in depth an examination of 35 animal species from the New World. So the two texts will be considered in order to better understand the interrelation between Hernandez's original zoological observations and the subsequent contribution of the Lynchian tradition. The primary objective will be to examine the structure and sources of the zoological entries developed by Hernandez and Faber, and to investigate the influence of the classical scientific tradition, particularly that of Aristotle. But why I am talking about Aristotle? I have here allowed several well-known documented reason in literature, including the significance of Aristotle Historia Animalium, the crucial phenomenon of Neo-Aristotelianism expressed throughout the colonized territory of the America, and also the deeply Aristotelian education context of Hernandez. The Aristotelianism of Hernandez is evident in his botany studies, But we have very few things we know very few things about this Aristotelianism in the zoological aspect. Less has been said here, but we can highlight the fact that Hernandez's Aristotelianism is reflected in his pragmatic spirit. The pragmatism is a characteristic of Aristotle's zoological writing. For example, the philosopher considered practical knowledge, for example, from who work with animals, hunters or fishermen. As far as the pragmatism in Hernandez, here you can see an example where in his discussion of the armadillo includes information about therapeutic application, saying that if you crush the shell of the animal and consume it in a specific way, this can help in curing the French disease or the syphilis. Also, Faber treatise includes frequent allusion to classical work. This reference sometimes support, but sometimes challenge Asian models. And I intend, as there have been few studies on the Aristotelianism in the zoological aspect, to fill this gap and examine how Hernandez and Faber also related to classical models and Aristotelian tradition. If we wish to consider Aristotle as primary sources, we must first consider the original sources, but also the concept of tradition, because every tradition has its own history in which knowledge is transmitted, but also sometimes obscured. So history involves also a filtering process. So, second, we must adopt also a scientific methodology that allows focusing on the specific, so working from the bottom to carry out a retrospective analysis, reconstruction up to the early sources. So, for this reason, before asking whether the sources are Aristotelian or non-Aristotelian, I think that it would be better for me to consider components regarding their relationship with classical literature, so starting from the text. So in concrete, I will focus on the education of Aristotle, start from the text, trying to understand where did Hernandez study, etc., and also trying to understand which text does Faber cite and what naturalistic work does he reference. And the Faber treatise is highly erudite. So this could facilitate this process, aiming for obviously for the classical Aristotelian sources, while taking into account the extensive network of mediation through which they have been transmitted in order to avoid a priori assumption. Well, for illustrative purpose, this is an example of an entry of the Faber treatise related to the Lupus mexicanus, where the author comparing the teeth of the human and the teeth of the dogs involves to explore the nature of the human gentleness and consider, as you can see, in a comparative way, the views of Galen, Aristotle, and Pliny. The second objective of my research will focus on the analysis of zoological terminology found in Hernandez's work, emphasizing both the lexical choices for naming species and the descriptive language used for their classification. Here, again, the case of the armadillo, where you can see that Hernandez includes the indigenous term, Aiotoxli, the Latin name Dasipode, probably used for the first time by Hernandez, that describe how it looks like, or that it's like a gourd. Additionally, I will consider the Spanish name that reflect a key morphological feature of the animal, as the term armadillo is derived from the diminutive of armado, arm in English. I will also analyze all the terminology that Hernandez uses in his description. Here in blue, I have highlighted some terms used to describe the animal. For example, he uses the term ostrificus, which in Latin means something marvelous and extraordinary. He also uses metaphors, saying, for example, that the animal has an armor, armatum laminis, that is similar to a dog, canis, that its ears are like those of a mouse, auriculae sunt murine. My research will mainly look at Latin and Spanish terms, since a detailed study of indigenous names is not my specialty. However, all indigenous terms will be included in the computational research. The extracted data will be represented within an ontoterminological research organized as two levels: the linguistic level, or the level of terminology, and the conceptual level, or the level of ontology. I will consider two distinct levels: the linguistic one, where we have a signifier and a signifier, and the conceptual level, where the meaning denotes a concept. These two will be described by using two important semantic web technologies, the resource description framework and the web ontology language. For the first, I will adopt the Ontolex Lemon model, whereas the conceptual dimension will be inspired by the simple lexical model. I will rely on the socio-terminological approach to terminology as my reference theory. The central idea of this theory is based on the differentiation between the linguistic level, where the term and its meaning are situated, and the conceptual level in an extra-linguistic dimension. I mentioned that in my research, the levels will be separated, and each will receive the description based on standard models. The linguistic side will have its formalization according to the Lemon model, which allows creating RDF lexicon that align perfectly with my theoretical framework. This model, in fact, separates the lexical sense or meaning from the concept, representing in an ontology outside the language, and connected with the model with a property. Here is a brief overview of the Lemon model. I will use this model to formalize the linguistic dimension and describe the morphological and semantic parts of each of them. As far as the conceptual level, the concept will be organized in an ontology, employing the editor Protégé, an ontology based on the simple model, which draws inspiration from the principle of generative lexicon of Pustejovsky. Here's a brief overview on the ontological model. The model is based on the concept of qualia structure notion, qualia structure notion. According to this idea, the semantic of a term can be decomposed into subcomponents, or meaning, or qualia, or roles, so that of a concept you can express its orthogonal dimension, or its formal role, or formal information, its constitutive role, telic role, and agentive role. And as you can see here from the figure, one can capture this multidimensionality of the concept. For example, the concept here of an animal through specific relations could be explained by saying what it is, what its parts are, what its function is, and who created it. It's something funny is that qualia structure notion is an interpretation of the four Aristotelian causes. So I find this connection very interesting. So far for the Hernandez text, a semi-automatic extraction process has identified 126 terms. However, this is only a partial extraction and further human verification is needed, mainly because the text provided in TXT format has a lot of gaps and a significant spelling errors. For this phase, I have used ChatGPT, but I plan to compare these results with those from other intelligence extraction tools, such as, I don't know, Sketch Engine, but every kind of suggestion today is welcome. Of course, to check the accuracy of the data. This is the initial phase of my research. So I am focusing on extracting candidate terms. The aim is to identify underlying concept while considering linguistic variation, because different terms may refer to the same concept. At the same time, I also intend to extract the names of scholars cited by Faber to help reconstruct the intellectual and terminological network and understand how this network is related to the classical sources. The terms so far have been organized into 5 Excel columns, which include the Latin term, as it appears in the text, the Latin terms in the nominative case, an English translation, a technical definition, and an ontological class. This preliminary and partial analysis suggests the presence of multiple ontological classes belonging to distinct domains, such as medicine and zoology, which, however, appear to be strongly interrelated. My research project will be structured over 3 years. The first year, I intended to do a literature review to refine the research question, develop a term extraction framework. In the second year, of course, during the first year, data will be structured in tables. In the second year, efforts will focus on consolidating the theoretical and methodological framework, and data structured in Excel tables will populate the ontoterminological research built using Protégé. In the final year, focus will be on completing the thesis, including feedback from advisor to refine the document. And of course, dissemination will continue, and the year maybe will culminate in the defense of the doctoral thesis. In my opinion, my project could be significant for several fields due to its comprehensive approach to analyze the intersection of zoology, history of science, linguistic, cultural heritage, and digital humanities. In the field of history science, the research could provide insight into the development of modern scientific thought, also considering the influence of the Aristotelian tradition. In the zoology field, my research could make a contribution to foundational zoological knowledge and could establish connection between Hernandez's work and later developments, such as lineals, binomial nomenclature. As far as linguistic and anthropology, the development of a lexicon focused on zoological terminology could allow exploration on how language reflects and shapes cultural and scientific transformation caused by colonization. As regards digital humanities, since my result will be built using the linked data paradigm, Probably it will allow for the discovery of new connection and insights through its interconnected structure. In addition, the results will be accessible in an open access format aligned with open science principles. So that this would make possible to share my findings of the project in order to enhance research collaboration in these fields. Here, some bibliography, and thank you.